Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Hey, it doesn't get much better than this. We got a jam-packed, absolutely loaded Virginia Tech Hokie full weekend. Thursday night, women's basketball against Iowa. Friday night, men's basketball against South Carolina, both down in the Queen City in Charlotte. And then Saturday, a noon kickoff against Boston College for a huge ACC matchup. We're going to preview all that and so much more. We got the entire crew on set today. It's episode 328 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Thursday, November 8th, 2023 from our high-tech studios here at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead, leave us a like, a comment, subscribe, and please go ahead and refer the show to a friend as well. Well, let's introduce our football crew, which is now kind of turning into our basketball crew as well with crossover season. To my right, as always, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Across the way, our senior staff writer, Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, managing editor David Cunningham. And producing behind the scenes, our general manager and founder, Mr. Will Stewart. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. And boy, guys, we got ourselves a fun Hokie weekend. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Doesn't get much better than that.
It's a lot of action. So women's basketball, men's basketball, football, wrestling against Ohio State.
Yeah, don't forget wrestling. Yeah. Wrestling is a top 10 matchup in Castle.
True. We're not previewing it, but it is true.
That is the one home game this weekend. And you like, in my opinion, that is a bigger game than probably men's basketball and potentially football this weekend. I mean, I know football will obviously, everybody wants to talk about football, but wrestling's got a top 10 matchup in Castle to open the season.
No doubt. Andy, your thoughts on this fantastic Hokie weekend?
I'll be up in Boston. So
enjoying the clam
watching
chowder?
As much of it on TV as I can.
Going with some seafood up there for sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe not both nights. I mean, when you're at the stadium and they've got clam chowder right there in the press box, yeah, I'll eat a couple bowls. I hope that appears in buy sell and over under on how many bowls of clam chowder we'll have later.
Might have to make an addition there. Well, we got to tell our viewers that Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. The Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you though by Alumni Hall. It's the place to gear up for Hokies games. Located in the First and Main Shopping Center in Blacksburg, they have been serving Hokie fans for 15 years. Order your Hokies gear online at alumnihall.com. Well, we're going to start football, and then we're going to get into our basketball talk. Boston College, 6-3 on the season, 3-2 in conference play, so they mirror the same record in ACC play as Virginia Tech. This is a weird team. It really is on paper. Almost, you could say, the epitome of inconsistent or really playing to the level of their competition. They get up for the big games and they get down for the lower caliber competition as well.
I would say, like, Florida State, that was a close game, but that's more about Florida State probably checking out. I think BC is a capable team. They're good enough to play Florida State close, but only if Florida State allows them to. But they're also bad enough to barely beat a Syracuse team that threw them 4 interceptions. And bad enough to barely beat a UConn team that is 1-8, and bad enough to barely beat FCS Holy Cross, and bad enough to lose to 4-5 Northern Illinois. This is a team that, with the exception of one win over Georgia Tech, all their wins are against bad teams, and they're very, very close games. That's pretty similar to Virginia Tech, except Virginia Tech's wins over bad teams are generally in blowout fashion. I think it's a pretty even matchup all in all. There are reasons to pick Virginia Tech. There are reasons to pick Boston College. And I think this is as much of a pick'em game as Virginia Tech has had this year.
Yeah, I think these are both bottom of the middle of the ACC teams. They can beat the really bad teams. They lose to the really good teams. And you bring up that Florida State game. Florida State was up like 30-3 in that game. I mean, it was a blowout. They kind of fell asleep. BC gets back into the game and almost pulls it off there. But they got crushed by Louisville. Almost as bad as Virginia Tech. Got crushed by Louisville. Like you said, you mentioned this 5-game winning streak. not exactly the titans of college football that they're going up against here. I mean, it's Virginia and Army and UConn and these teams that they're beating. They're not beating them by a lot. They're getting by a little bit. And I think that's reflected in the line for this game, which opened BC. One place is 4, I think 2.5 might have been more reasonable number on that. At a lot of places now, it's Virginia Tech by 1.5. Mm-hmm. FanDuel still has BC by 1.5, and a lot of other places still has Virginia Tech by 1.5. So it's like nobody knows really what to do with this game. So when I talk about this game, I go, these are the same team. Like regardless of how they're playing right now, and BC winning 5 straight, Virginia Tech coming off its worst loss of the season. I feel like these are just very similar programs. I feel like it's going to be a pretty even matchup.
Well, you mentioned that they've won 5 straight, and no matter how you spin it, I think any coach is going to tell you you're happy to just pull away a win. Andy, you had mentioned that they kind of got beat up by Louisville. With that being said, they still scored 28 points on the Cards. The Hokies just scored 3. Granted, there's a big gap in, I want to say, a 4-week separation between when those games took place. But is there something to take away from the fact that they were able to score 28 on really one of the best defenses in the conference, if not the country?
Maybe. They also gave up 56 in that game, and Virginia Tech gave up 34. So I don't think either team is really writing home about how great they played against Louisville in that game. They were both, 4 touchdown losses or 4 score losses for both teams. So also that was a while ago. Teams change, and especially just the week to week volatility with some of the stuff. I don't go like, well, I don't use that transitive property necessarily when I'm trying to compare these teams. So I just look at it as they both got blown out by Louisville.
I don't understand the mentality of the fan base that everybody's so scared of Boston College this week. I think it's because Tech just lost to Louisville bad, and I think people look at a 6-3 Boston College team, and I've seen a lot of people on our boards this week trying to find reasons to justify picking Boston College to win the game, and it's like, well, they scored 56 against Louisville, and my response to that is, yeah, and they scored 17 against Syracuse. What's your point? You can't take these one game little comparisons each and every week and use that as your decision maker on who's going to win this week's game. You look at the overall trends in the overall season, and their offense is trending down because their quarterback appears to be banged up. And I think that's why the line has changed. He had to come out of the UConn game a couple of weeks ago. He's been running to the ground. He's a 196-pound quarterback who has more carries this year than Baishul Tootin. He had 31 carries against Army. There was a 3-week stretch where he had something like 50 carries or something like that. And his last 2 games, his yards per carry has dropped like a rock. His passing yardage and completion percentage have dropped like a rock. He's ineffective right now because he's banged up. And that's why their offense isn't nearly as effective right now as it was earlier in the season. You can be studying the Louisville game. You can be studying the Florida State game. He doesn't appear to be the same quarterback as he was earlier in the year because he just seems like he's playing hurt right now.
And I don't think BC can necessarily go into it and be like, well, we're going to run him less, because a lot of those are just scramble plays or where he takes off when somebody's not open. That's just sort of the quarterback that he is. And it's been extremely effective. I mean, shoot, he ran for 140 some yards and 4 touchdowns, I think, against Army. So, I mean, he's a tough guy to tackle in that backfield. And you look at a Virginia Tech defense that has had trouble stopping mobile quarterbacks, has had trouble stopping the run. It's going to be a real challenge, but I do think they're a little one-dimensional. I don't think they throw the ball well. I do think Castellanos is banged up a bit, and I don't think Chestnut Hill is this impenetrable fortress that some people like to make it out. They've lost 2 straight up there. The last one was a pretty lousy one where Braxton Burmeister gets hurt. They have the backup quarterback and they can't do anything offensively. I don't think they complete a pass until like the last 2 minutes of the first half. So maybe Hokies fans are still burned with that image in their minds about how tough this place is, or you go back even farther, the Brendan Hill Thursday night, what was it, 22-3, and he was dancing at the end.
Sweet Caroline.
Yeah, well, it was Riding Dirty was the song he was dancing to, not Sweet Caroline. And then Herb Street just mysteriously goes off. Like, I went back and listened to that the other day. It's like, Herb Street, what the heck? Like, just completely getting into this guy about dancing at the end of the game. It's kind of ridiculous. But I think those memories are sort of seared in people's minds, Hokies fans, that they remember those losses. But, since the Virginia Tech kind of fell off as a program after 2011, they're 3-3 up at Chestnut Hill. So it's not like it's the Carrier Dome or it's Heinz Field. I'm going to continue to refer to those by the incorrect names because that's how I know them. Where it feels like you're really up against the odds when you go to those places. I feel like that's less so at BC.
This Army game that you guys are speaking of, it took place back on the 7th of October. It was a 27-24 win for Boston College. It was like the epitome of what you'd think of when you think of Army playing against Boston College. Two teams that run the football a whole heck of a lot. Granted, I don't think historically you're going to think Boston College is going to run their quarterback. So a little bit of a different approach. And Army is starting to shy further away from the triple option, but against Army, they only passed the ball 9 times, and they ran their quarterback 31 times in that ball game. That's crazy. Castellanos took 31 carries.
That game had to be like one of the quickest games in the history of football. I've not looked at the box score to see if that's true, but you would think it would be.
Those are the best kind. Remember when they used to play Georgia Tech here, and it's like, oh my God, that was like an hour-long halftime. That was awesome.
Yep.
So these wins you were talking about where they're barely scraping by, barely beat Holy Cross, barely beat UVA, barely beat Army, UConn, Syracuse, all one-possession games, and actually lost their season opener to Northern Illinois. Take with that what you will. That was so long ago, the very, very beginning of September. But with 3 games left, they have a pretty good chance to have an impressive record here. Like if Boston College runs the table, you're looking at a 9-win team, a chance to win 10 wins at a bowl game.
They're not going to run the table. Look at their last. Who do they play the last week of the season?
Miami's the last one, but they got Tech and Pitt.
Tech and Pitt. They have a chance to win 8 games. If they win 8 games, Hafley will get votes for ACC Coach of the Year. He won't win it, but he would get and deserve votes because they would have improved from 3 wins to 8 wins. And if you look at their offense, they were dead last in rushing offense last year. Dead last. Now they're 10th.
Not even like 100 yards a game. It was 63 and a half.
Yes.
Like it was pathetically bad.
Their yards per carry was also dead last, 2.09 yards per carry. The next worst team was like 2.7 yards, significantly ahead. So yeah, they added Castellanos, and that's helped a lot in the running game.
Christian Mahogany is back.
Mahogany's back from an injury. They've improved their 2 returning starters on the offensive line. They also hit the portal to bring in 2 starting offensive linemen. The main thing is they fired their old offensive coordinator, got a new one. They have a associate head coach for offense who used to be a coordinator and a head coach in the NFL. He was also Miami's offensive coordinator from 2001 to 2003 when the Canes were peaking as a program. So this guy was like, Ken Dorsey, quarterback coach in high school. And they got their offensive line coach back. Their offensive line was pretty good in 2020 and 2021. He leaves and goes to the Miami Dolphins last year, and all of a sudden the Dolphins' yards per carry goes up by 0.8 yards per carry, and BC's offensive line tumbles. It's the worst in football. Now he's back, and magically they can block people again. So they made significant upgrades to their staff. They got a key player back from injury and hit the portal for a couple of other guys, and they've been able to turn their offense around on a dime. The competition has been poor. I want to make that clear. Like, this is a 6-3 team, but it's like not a good 6-3.
Well, SP Plus, they're still lower than Virginia Tech.
Lower than Tech, right? Exactly. But they are 6-3, and they've changed their fortunes with some good recruitment in the transfer portal and the right decisions on the coaching staff. So I think he's done a good job this year. He won the offseason, we'll say, and I think that's put him in a position to be a better team this year.
Taking a look at the history between Boston College and Virginia Tech, 3 of the last 5 have been won by the Eagles, but Virginia Tech is 4-3 in the last 7 trips to Chestnut Hill. 20 wins for Virginia Tech all time, 11 wins for Boston College. This is kind of a fun little conversation before we get into some X's and O's. Like, name some memories, because these 2 teams have played. They've played for ACC championships, and you guys were along for that ride.
The 1995 game, which Tech lost, and then they lost the next week against Cincinnati, but then went on to finish 10-2 and win the Sugar Bowl. That game stands out because, like, you look at Virginia Tech beating UVA and stomping Texas at the end of the season, and you're like, how did you lose to 4-7 Boston College to start the year? BC was a good program back then, but they weren't in that particular year.
Was it one of the like elite Michael Vick runs against BC? Where
2000.
they brought the
Yes.
house and kind of like bounced in the pocket back and forth and got to the sideline.
That's
was that the one where he like spun into the end zone? Or am I
Yes.
thinking of a different one?
And then nobody tackled him on the play until he got in the end zone, and his own wide receiver just comes up and slams into the ground in celebration. I'm like, are you kidding me? Don't get the franchise hurt in the back of the end zone after he scores.
Bill had a really cool call on that. He was like, jukes, jives, spins, end zone, touchdown. And he was like, give him the Heisman. Give it to him right now. Obviously, he didn't win the Heisman.
Well, he got in the open field after he burst up the sideline. He almost like turned into a jog and then just kind of weaved at the end and
was
spun
awesome.
around.
It was maybe. It's probably, besides the run against West Virginia, probably his most famous run. If you want to show the highlight clip of Michael Vick, that's the first play that's on the highlight. He also had one against Akron that year that I remember being very impressive, but I don't think that might not have been a televised game for all I remember. I just remember being at the game, and I remember it being an insane run. BC, gosh.
There's the horrible memory of 2007.
Right.
You know, that wasn't in Chestnut Hill, but that the history of the rivalry there, the Matt Ryan comeback. But then avenging that in the ACC title game, beating that, it was 07-08, correct?
2 years
back
in
to
a row.
back.
Yeah, the ACC was so thrilled about that matchup for 2 years in a row. Of course,
Virginia Tech and Boston College in Jacksonville.
and actually one of them was
in Tampa.
Was in Tampa.
Okay.
I remember that. Yeah,
Yikes.
that was where the overhead shot of the like 25% filled stadium came from.
Well, I remember I was at that first one, the Matt Ryan one, and they had John Swafford came up to the press box at halftime, so reporters could interview him about it. And it was a terrible crowd at the thing, and they were talking about where are we going to put this game in the future? Is it going to be here? And he's like, Jacksonville's been such a great partner to us, and Mark Berman, the Roanoke Times, is right there. He's like, Jacksonville, where's Jack? What planet is Jacksonville on? Look at this crowd. You're telling me Jacksonville's gonna be in the mix? Like just totally, just like feet to the fire, like chomping ankles the whole time, trying to get to the thing. And then the ACC spokesman was like, okay, I think we've had enough questions here. And they like shut the whole thing down. But Berman was all over that angle. I distinctly remember that. It was hilarious.
That's great. Okay. The one, we'd be bad. We'd be a really bad tech show if we didn't mention this game, the 99 Boston College game. It clinched the undefeated season. It was the last game of the year. And BC was a ranked team. That was a good BC team that year.
Is that the one where the famous picture of Frank on the shoulders, like him in the arms?
Absolutely. And because I was at that game. So I was a junior in high school. And I'd come to the UAB game earlier that year, which Tech had won, but Vic hadn't played. But I told my dad, we didn't have season tickets at the time. I said, Tech's going unbeaten this year, most likely. You need to get tickets right now to the Boston College game because that's going to clinch the unbeaten season. He did, and it did. And but that's obviously that'll be ingrained in my memory as a fan forever. Just clinching that undefeated season and being there.
Recent games, man, there haven't been that many good ones.
Last year was fun. The Sack Fest, what do we have?
I'm thinking like up at Chestnut Hill, like was it 2012 when they won in overtime?
Martin Scales picked up, it was like 4th and 2, and he picked up 3 yards, and there was no blocking. It was all Martin Scales. He had to pick up that.
Didn't Cody Janelle make a long field goal to send it into overtime?
He might have.
And I think that was the first time they wore the
Foghorn
Leghorn helmets that I hate, that are just the ugliest things.
Which ones are those?
It's the flexing like chicken one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are just horrible jerseys. It just looks like a giant just blob on the side of the helmet.
Did you see the Louisville helmets on Saturday? Those
are awesome.
Cardinal doing the Heisman.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It's their logo at midfield too.
Let's see. That was a pretty dreadful game. I remember BC was so bad for such a long time up there. Such a positive city going up to Boston.
Yeah, I bet
We're
it is.
watching in the press box, and there's one year where they just could not score on offense, and the Hokies hit them with like an early touch. I think this was when Leffler was there. I think Matuapawaka had like a fumble that he ripped out and returned it for a touchdown. Anyway, the Hokies hit a touchdown in like the first 5 minutes of the game or something like that. And it was like a long pass, and some crusty old sports writer in the front just turns to everybody and goes, "Game over." like immediately. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is the full Boston experience. I love it.
That's fantastic. One interesting thing too that I just thought of as we were sitting here, as you brought up the Cardinal doing the Heisman. every matchup this weekend, I guess, besides the wrestling against Ohio State, is featuring a bird mascot. You got Virginia Tech Hokies, Iowa Hawkeyes, you got South Carolina Gamecocks, and you got the Boston College Eagles. So for whatever that's worth, I found that to be an interesting tidbit there. But Castellanos, quarterback for Boston College, he had his least impactful game against UConn, Chris. Just 14 carries for 45 yards. That was 39 yards below his average, and he didn't have a rushing touchdown in that game either. What did UConn do that maybe Virginia Tech can try and replicate? Because they're really one of the poorest teams in all of FBS to kind of contain him.
I just think he's hurt. I think that's the bottom line. I think the Syracuse can't stop anybody, but they stopped them last week because he's hurt. You go back and watch the film of him against Florida State or even against Louisville, and it's just not the same now. I think when you have a 196-pound quarterback and you've only played, you got 3 games left, and he's already got 140 some carries. He's probably running to the ground quite a bit. And I think that's something they'll need to try to avoid next year. For all I know, he's been in a hot tub all week, and maybe they're not practicing him, and he'll be 100% on Saturday. But he was certainly not been 100% the last 2 weeks. And I just think that their offense is about half effective if he's not 100%.
Yeah, and you look at their running back, too, Robichaux. Is that how you pronounce that? He took a really high hit in that Syracuse game. I don't know exactly what his status for this game is, but he had to leave at the end of that game, and you see head injury, whatever it was that he goes out with. It makes you wonder for the following week. I know, even though they had a couple extra days because of when they played that game. So they could be a beat-up offense going into this game.
Garwo, another one of their running backs, played in the first 5 or 6 games of the season, but hasn't played in the last 3, so there might be an injury going on there. Garwo was a guy, I think he's like 2nd or 3rd string now, but I think it was 2 or 3 years ago he rushed for 1,000 yards.
Yeah, he was up there. He was like the next back they had.
BC actually kind of throws the ball a little bit more than you'd think they do. When you see, they're so rushing dominant, you wouldn't think that they throw the ball very much at all, but it's actually a little bit more balanced than you'd think. They went 20 of 37 against Syracuse for 165 yards last week, scored 17 points. Nothing too impressive, but 37 passing attempts with a banged-up quarterback. What do you think they offer in the passing game?
I think his escapability has generated a lot of big plays for them in the passing game, particularly if you go back and watch the highlights from Florida State, which I included in the game preview. But it's not the passing game's not working for them now. I mean, 165 yards on 37 attempts, that's as putrid as it gets. And that's not going to beat Virginia Tech this weekend unless they just have a dominant rushing game. Which
quite possible.
Well, you never know. You never know. That might have happened to Virginia Tech a time or two this year, but I don't think it'll happen this week because I don't think he's healthy enough. It just doesn't. It's not trending that way. He hasn't been healthy the last week, so unless they find some sort of magic potion this week, then I think it's going to be a low-scoring kind of slugfest.
Boston College does give the ball away quite a bit here. They've lost 5 fumbles on the year, given away 7 interceptions. With that being said, outside of the Wake Forest game, Virginia Tech doesn't really amass a whole ton of takeaways. How do you think this plays a factor on Saturday?
Turnovers are so unpredictable in nature. Virginia Tech, what do they force? 3 against Old Dominion, and I think they forced, was it 3 against Wake Forest as well?
Yeah, I think 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
But other than that, have they forced any turnovers in any other game?
Not a lot. I mean, they haven't forced teams into passing situations or obvious passing situations. I think that's where you get a lot of them because fumbles are like, the ball's out there and it's on the ground. It's sort of 50-50 whether you recover it. I think the interceptions are really where you can make some hay in a turnover battle type thing. And, teams just haven't had to throw against them. And when they do, they're in favorable situations like Plummer last week. I mean, he was 11 of 12. Don't think he had to put the ball in danger at all in that game. And if that's the case, when are you going to throw a pick?
You guys talked about how Jeff Hafley has really turned this thing around, right? 3 wins to 8 wins. Well, a huge part of that has been the offensive line. How do you 180 that? What acquisitions did they make in the offseason from being literally one of the worst offensive lines in all of FBS college football to now being up towards the midway to the top portion of college football?
I think the big thing is they acquired a few new coaches. And I think when you get that successful offensive line coach back after 1 season in the NFL, I think that's added quite a bit because their 2 returning starters that played last year are playing at a much higher level than they did a year ago when they couldn't block anybody. And you get Mahogany back. He's an all ACC level offensive lineman at right guard. And then you supplement those three guys with a couple portal guys. They got a guy from UVA who's magically blocking a lot better for Boston College than he did for UVA. And then they went down to went to a lower level and got a guy from Texas State who's doing a solid job for them. So I think it's a combination of things. I think they got better coaches. I think they've been healthier, and I think they hit the portal for a couple of key guys, which is that's the best case scenario for any team this year. You can't just change over coaches. You can't just hit the portal. You can't just develop your own guys within the program. Like, you have to develop your own guys, and then if you have the opportunity to supplement them from players outside the program, you have to do that too. And that's probably what Virginia Tech will have to do this year.
Well, they played like 6 or 7 of them at the same time. Sometimes they put in those jumbo packages out there. I think they're more aligned as an offense with what they want to do under Castellanos. You look at last year with Jurkovic, it was just a mess with that offense. He wasn't a mobile guy at all. Emmett Moorhead, started the season this year. He didn't look like the guy either. And they bring in Castellanos, and maybe it's kind of similar to drones. The Hokies couldn't run the ball before they put in a mobile quarterback back there, and it opens up the possibility, and they're dedicated to playing offense that way going forward. I think it all goes into sort of the same pot, and all of a sudden you have an effective running game. Now, I didn't think they go from 60 yards a game to 211. That's a radical turnaround, but they work at it too. They run the ball just a ton. It's not the highest yards per carry average, but they are dedicated to it, and they do it over and over and over. And sometimes they can put games away because they have the ball for 45 minutes because they are just that dedicated to their ground game.
You go to the other side of the football, and we talk about the defense for Boston College. Pretty good defensively in the pass game, but they're incredibly porous in the run defense, specifically against mobile quarterbacks. Kind of been the Achilles heel of the Eagles this season. Against Holy Cross, Matthew Sculla, 19 carries, 135 yards. Army's Bryson Daly, 14 carries, 99 yards. Georgia Tech's Matthew King, 10 carries, 150 yards. And then Syracuse's backup, who threw 4 interceptions last week, Carlos Del Rio Wilson, he goes 12 carries for 67 yards. Well, the good thing is Virginia Tech's got one of those, a mobile quarterback in Kyron Drones, Andy.
Yeah, I would run drones a lot in this game. I would do whatever, lean on whatever I need to from the Army coach on staff and go, we're going to run it triple option style. We're going to have
their old guy too.
Those concepts all over the place. Just do what you can to run the ball in this team, because I do think they are pretty effective. Boston College, that is, at stopping the pass, or at least defending the pass. And I think the Hokies, when they're at their best, they're ahead of the sticks. They're running the ball. Drones is heavily involved with that. You see what Tootin can do. Maybe you have to mitigate things a little bit with your offensive line and where they're at in their development. But I think that could be the strength of this offense if they dedicate to it.
It's a great matchup for Virginia Tech. The Boston College weakness on defense aligns perfectly with the Virginia Tech strength. Boston College is outside the top 100 in rush defense. They have struggled with mobile quarterbacks this year. Been very good against the pass, though. Elijah Jones is an outstanding quarterback. So I feel like this is a game where it needs to be, 2/3 run from Virginia Tech with a whole lot of Kyron Drones, because they've struggled to stop mobile quarterbacks this year. I think most teams struggle to start mobile quarterbacks. There's a reason so many teams start mobile quarterbacks. It's not just a Virginia Tech thing. Virginia Tech's not the only defense that struggles with it. All defenses struggle with it. And otherwise, Kyron Drones wouldn't have had such a successful running year this year for the Hokies. So I think you take advantage of that, especially this week, and you don't go out there and try to throw the ball all over the field when the other team has shown that they're quite good at stopping the pass. Elijah Jones, Georgia Tech tried to pick on him for some reason, threw at him 7 times, completed 1 of them for 11 yards. That's like 6 wasted plays.
Did he have the pick 6 in that game? He had one where it was like he almost like ripped it away from the Georgia Tech receiver and took it back. Somebody had one.
I don't remember whether it was him or not, but
Tell you in a sec.
He might be like the most experienced player Tech faces this year. Over 2,700 career snaps. Yeah, don't throw at that guy. Let's just run the ball. A lot of Bishul Tootin, a lot of Kyron Drones, a lot of Malachi Thomas. You accomplish 2 things with that. You play to your own strength, and you attack the other team's weakness. But on the other side of things, you keep Castellanos off the field. And I think that's the way to go about things this week. I think that's a matchup advantage for Virginia Tech.
Amari Jackson was the one that had the pick six.
Okay.
That was a pretty
The
pick
other
six.
corner,
He basically just took it away from the receiver and almost like one-handed, I think.
They've got good corners for the second week in a row. Tech's facing a pair of good corners.
Well, hopefully Tech's got the receivers to handle it. Jalen Lane and Quan Felton have been pretty strong as of late. The one thing that I really liked in your article, Chris, so kudos to you here, is that you talked about the lack of havoc plays for Boston College on defense, right? Tackle for loss numbers, they're number 132 out of 133 in the country. Sacks, number 125. A reminder, Virginia Tech's number 5 in the country in sacks.
I'm glad this is a perfect transition because I said it's a good matchup for Tech offensively because the BC weakness is rush defense and the Tech strength is rush offense. The other matchup advantage here is that Virginia Tech is an offense that has to stay ahead of the change to be successful. They can't get behind the change. Well, BC's defense never puts opposing offenses behind the chains. They do not make plays in the backfield. They average, just about 3.5 tackles for loss per game, which is pretty much nothing. They only have 11 sacks this season. This is a game where the Hokies are going to be ahead of the chains or at worst neutral. If they get behind the chains in this game, it would be very disappointing. That would be the Hokies not playing to their potential. So this is a game that I think all the matchups are there for the Hokies. They're not going to be behind the chains. They're going to be facing a team that doesn't do well stopping the run and a team that I think has a banged up quarterback, which is going to make their own offense ineffective. So there's a lot of matchup advantages in this game for Virginia Tech. Very winnable game. Have to win it.
It's the defensive numbers are weird for BC because that's not what you think of when you think of the Eagles. Like, how many straight years did they have a guy with like 10 sacks? It seems like every year they had some defensive end. It's like, oh man, this guy's destroying the, like, go back to Matthias Kiwanuka or something. Like, I don't know why that name sticks out. Yeah, the linebackers always have like 200 tackles on that team. So I mean, it's not the defensive front that you most likely think of when you think of BC.
Yeah, it's the whole defense for BC is off from what you would normally expect. It used to be, they're kind of shut down your run, but they're going to leave their corners probably in some man situations, and you're going to be able to beat them deep. And it's not the case anymore.
Yeah, different look for BC too. Because when do you think of Boston College and think, hey, running quarterback?
Well, exactly. Never, it's a totally different Boston College than what you're used to.
I mean, it's used like a 3,000-pound offensive line with a 260-pound running back going like AJ Dillon or they had some other really large running backs in the past that just dominate.
Obviously, I know that Jeff Hafley is the coach there, and you do think of that. He's a younger head coach in college football, but I still think when I think like Boston College brand, you think like Steve Adazio and just completely different
Hafley's
look.
a unique hire.
Somebody with a mustache.
Who was the guy who looked like Tom Selleck was their head coach? Frank Spaziani. That was it.
I always like that because they listened to like a press conference or a teleconference one time, and all the Boston beat writers got like, hey Spaz, I got a question about this. It's like, you call the coach Spaz? It's just that's what they called it. You mentioned like Hafley, like 6 wins, they could get 9 wins. Like, there's this like Adazio ceiling on this program that 7 wins is about what you're going to get. Like, you're not going to win 9 games at BC. I'd have to go back and look up the numbers. I don't think Adazio ever got over 7, maybe 8 once. But like, you have to go back to like Jagosinski in his 2 years when he had an incredible run there, and then they fired him for interviewing with the New York Jets to find a coach that sort of broke out of that 6-7 win ceiling that they always are on. So BC might be on a roll right now, but I think BC is still BC. So I wouldn't get carried away with that.
Pitt next week, or it depends
I
what they do?
I don't put that in the win category for sure. I think that's going to be just a brutal rock fight of a game. I can't imagine it's going to be pretty at all.
Yeah, like all BC's games are close, almost all of them, except for the Louisville game and except for the Georgia Tech game. So 7 of
Georgia Tech was closer than that score indicated.
Right. You're absolutely
I think it was
right.
Pretty close going to the fourth quarter.
It was, but like, they don't run away from anybody, and very few teams run away from them. Just Louisville, really. Florida State did early, but then BC came back. So there's like nothing to indicate that this won't be a pretty close game this weekend.
All right, let's check in with David in the fourth chair. You got anything football wise for us, D-Con?
Yeah, I think, and shout out to David Teal. He emailed Andy and Damian Sorlett and I this yesterday. Boston College is one that, like, time of possession has been crucial for BC this year. And Teal ran the numbers for the snap counts. BC has a snap edge of the last 5 games of 392 to 264. Andy put that in his story yesterday. We talk about how the Virginia Tech offense has a good chance because the BC defense does not usually put people behind the sticks, which is good. We talked on Monday about how bad the Virginia Tech offense has been behind the sticks this year. So that's a good sign. On the other side, we've talked about the Boston College offense and how it's so run heavy. And I think the big thing in terms of run heaviness is that Boston College has controlled the clock so well. Virginia Tech has to be mindful of that, and I'm sure the coaches will, going into this game of, not that Boston College is going to sit there and try to milk the clock the entire game, but the fact that Boston College had a 70 to 46 snap difference against Army, or a 83-43 difference against UConn. Against Syracuse was 94 to 47.
They doubled them up.
That's nuts. This is an offense that has kind of methodical, and again, not great, but I think that's something to keep an eye on. My question for Andy and Chris is this: what is it going to take for Virginia Tech, in your eyes, to win this game? What's it going to come down to?
I think they've got to sort of employ that same strategy that Boston College uses against Boston College. I think with Boston College's weakness and Virginia Tech's strength, Virginia Tech should be able to use the exact same strategy against the Eagles, except in theory, they've got more explosiveness at wide receiver, I feel like, than Boston College does. So in theory, maybe the play action game can work for them a little bit more, and on 2nd and 2, you can hit a deep one for a touchdown or something like that. I think the strategy is to run the football and don't turn it over. I know that sounds boring. I know that sounds like 20th century football, but you go out there and you hope Castellanos hitting 100%. But if he's not 100%, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to hold them below 20 points this week, because they only scored 17 against a bad Syracuse team. They only scored 21 against a bad UConn team. So hold them below 20 points, which I think you should be able to do. And go out there and establish the run with your running quarterback against a team that can't defend the run. Like, Virginia Tech, in my opinion, is in a good position to win this game if they play to their strengths. And if they show up, they have to mentally show up in a way that they didn't against Louisville last week, of course. But at the same time, this isn't an atmosphere in which you should lose your head.
Yeah, I think they got to show up from the beginning, too. Mm-hmm. They've been such a slow starting team, especially on the road. You don't want to fall behind 10-0 on BC. That's how BC gets in its comfort zone. It's like, all right, we'll just grind this thing away. We'll just run it every single time. Like, stop us with your 89th ranked rushing defense, whatever it is. I think that they get in too big a hole. That's been a big problem and a recurring theme all season. And this is just not the team to do that against. Now, conversely, if you get up early, I don't think BC is a team that's made to be playing from behind and coming back in games. So we might know in the first quarter kind of how this game is going to play out. I mean, if they fall down 14-0 again, like, good night. I don't think they're coming back from that in this one.
Yeah, I think that's, in terms of going into this game, I think that's the biggest thing. We talk about Virginia Tech, like, not playing well on the road, struggling. You look at Virginia Tech's road games this year, and the only game Tech scored in the first quarter was Marshall. Tech came out, ran the ball well. Kyron Drones had that long, which at the time was the longest play from scrimmage of the year, had that long, like, 30-something yard run. Tech's up 7-0. That was the only time this year Tech has scored first on the road. And I think in terms of Virginia Tech going up, we already talked about the environment and whatnot, but against a team that kind of plays like this in a game that you need to win, I think starting first is going to be really, really important. And if Virginia Tech can do that, like you guys just mentioned, I think it puts BC, up against a wall a little bit where BC can't be as methodical, maybe has to take a little bit more chances, which maybe plays into Tech's hands a little bit.
If BC scores first, I'm turning to whoever's in the press box. I'm just going, game over. Just going straight to it. I don't care if they get the reference. I'm going to say it and go back to my chair.
You're going to do it with the accent?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Of course.
You have to.
That's the whole point.
You have to. Let's play a little buy or sell, shall we, gentlemen? Cool. Well, just to remind everybody, last week Chris went 17-6. He won the day. David and Andy both went 15-8, despite David's red hot 6-0 start. And the all-time records: Chris has a 62 win percentage, 23-14. David 22-14 for a 59% win percentage. He also has that one draw, so to speak, with a hold. Andy 37-19. He leads all, 66 on his win percentage. Will is 9-10. He's the only one below the Mendoza line with a 47% there.
This is why he's behind the camera today.
Yes.
Get about 500, then you can be back on camera.
There we go. I'm curious. I don't think I would fare very well in this game, so I'm curious what I would end up doing. But let's play here. Virginia Tech, 2 or more sacks. We'll start on the other side. Since Chris likes to play this new strategy, then midway through we're gonna flip it and make you go first.
Yeah, why don't you just do it randomly each question?
All right. I like that.
Out of a hat.
Okay. Virginia Tech, 2 or more sacks. David.
I'll buy it. I think Tech gets 2 sacks.
2 is a good number. I like that. I think they get there.
Bye.
Everybody's buying it on Virginia Tech, 2 or more sacks. All right. Virginia Tech forces a turnover. Andy.
I'll say yes. 1, I don't think Castellanos throws the ball very well. I think 1, they do pick 1 off.
Force, how many? 1?
Forces a turnover.
A turnover. Bye.
Yeah, I'll buy it. I think this is a game. It was very, very weird against a really good Louisville offense. Obviously, Tech didn't really get a push. Curious to see what kind of push Tech gets up front. Feels like APR was a little too quiet.
All right, fair enough. Virginia Tech, Castellanos, 16 or more carries. We'll start with Chris.
Bye. That seems to be their. I mean, he got hurt against UConn, and still the next week he had like 22 carries against Syracuse. Like, they don't care if he's hurt; they're going to keep running him right into the ground.
Yeah, I'm going to buy, and the only way I think the under hits on that is if he does get hurt and has to go out of the game,
or if Tech gets a big lead and they have to throw. But even then, he'll probably be scrambling some. So yeah I think it's an easy buy.
Yeah, I'll buy it.
How am I supposed to take the overall lead if we're all answering the same?
Fair. Boston, well, this is where last week you guys were like, oh, we got to switch it up, and started picking against each other just for that. Boston College throws the ball 29 or more times. We'll start with Andy again.
Sell.
Okay.
Hard sell.
All right. David?
Yeah, selling that. No way.
I mean,
they throw the ball more than you guys would think that they do.
And what they throw it 37 times last week in the Dome?
Yeah. Granted, they were gifted possessions by 4 interceptions.
That's correct. Yeah. They absolutely were. I will sell that one because I don't
think they're going to run 94 plays.
No,
exactly.
I look at this game and I go, if Castellanos is somehow injured, they're not going to put in a quarterback and try to make the kid throw it a lot, right? So either way, either they're going to run it a lot with Castellanos as long as he's healthy. They're going to run it a lot with Robichaux, who's very good.
But also questionable.
If they bring in a backup, they're probably going to run the ball.
Well, if they put in Moorhead, I mean, he started before and he chucks it a lot. I think that absolutely would change.
Let me interrupt, and this is going to have some more information on the Boston College offense. This is from long lost Hokie, who clearly knows a lot about BC. Castellanos was hurt against UConn and very limited in that game as a result. There were lingering effects and a quick turnaround versus Syracuse, but he still ran it 22 times. Their top 3 running backs to start the season, Garwo, Robichaux, and Brooms, are injured. Garwo's out for the year. Robichaux and Brooms are questionable. Their starting tight end is in a boot this week. One of their top wide receivers is still out after a scary neck injury versus UVA. So their offense is trending down this year with all these players hurt. They're going to be a shell of their former selves this Saturday with all these injuries. So those points they were putting up earlier in the year against Louisville and against Florida State, those box scores aren't really applicable now when you're studying this current Boston College team.
Wasn't everybody on Louisville supposed to be hurt last week? How'd that turn out?
Yeah,
fair.
Yeah. They've got a little bit more overall, I think, though.
Well, to defend my line, because I'm going to laugh in everybody's face if they do throw it more than 29 or more times, going through the list here, because I try and kind of compile a fairly recent average, right? 37 against Syracuse, threw it 24 against UConn, 29 against Georgia Tech, only 9 against Army. That's a complete outlier because of the matchup. 16 against UVA, 33 against Louisville, 33 against Florida State, playing from behind, 23 against Holy Cross, 28 against NIU. So it's not crazy out of the realm to throw it around 29 times. So I guess we'll
Depends
see
on
what
how the
happens.
game's going. But I think both teams are going to have about 60 offensive plays in this
Yeah,
game. I don't think it's
two
gonna
of
be a
those
game
they
with
were
a ton
down
of
big
plays.
and had to throw it, and one of them they ran 94 plays. So you're gonna have some throws
Right.
in there somewhere.
Boston College, 205 or more rushing yards. David.
205.
Yes, sir.
I think that's a really good line, Gio.
Thanks, man.
I'll buy it.
I will sell. I go under.
Sell. In fact, I think this is going to be the first normal number for Virginia Tech
You got
run
like
defense.
150 or something like that.
I don't know, like 125, something like that. It's not going to be 250. It's not going to be
400
0.
yards coming. Now that you said that.
Boston College, 195 or more passing yards.
So
I'll sell too. I think it's going to be ugly offensive game.
D-Connor?
Yeah, I'll sell that.
Everybody's selling it. Let me type it in. Bookmark it. All right. Castellanos accounts for 3 or more touchdowns. We'll start with Chris.
they're not going to score 3 touchdowns.
Oh, yeah, I have them only scoring 2 touchdowns, so I'll have to sell that one.
All right, David.
Yeah, so.
All right. Kyron Drones accounts for 3 or more touchdowns. Andy.
Sell.
All right. David.
So.
Wow. Everybody's selling. All right.
We're not expecting an offensive explosion in this game, I think. Watch, it'll be like 49 to 48.
You can still score 21
it'll
points.
be like the NC State Marshall game earlier this year.
Randomly,
Like
how many
one outlier
touchdowns
for
did-
both teams.
They scored 2 touchdowns last week.
Who?
BC.
BC. Yeah.
Yeah, like.
I mean, Tech could
Tech
score
scored
21 points. We
Well,
kick
Tech
a lot of
scored
field goals.
3 points last week. So.
yeah. This is not. This is not Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert out here.
Fair enough. Beischel to an anytime touchdown.
Bye.
I'll buy it. I think best offensive weapon. I think if they're going to score a touchdown, they should give it to him.
D-Connor?
I'll sell it.
He's going to sell it. Hey, for the sake of trying to get ahead in the
For the sake
standings.
of doing something different.
We've got to get back to the random order again. by
Yeah,
the way.
right. Okay. John Love, 3 or more field goals. Andy.
I have Tech scoring 22 points, and to get there, I think I'm going to go 5 field goals. So I'm going to buy.
Wow. David.
How many field goals?
3 or more.
I had Tech scoring.
You get locked into these picks.
I'm gonna say no. Oh wait, 3 or more? Yeah, no. Sell.
Sell. Chris.
I'm buying. I have Tech scoring 23. So that's either 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals or 3 touchdowns and a safety.
Okay.
I'm going with the. So
I'm
going with the field goals.
The
Or
safety
some
thing?
2-point shenanigans that
Yeah.
they miss. So there you go.
Virginia Tech, 200 or more passing yards. We'll start with Chris.
Passing yards, 200 or more. So
I'm going to sell that one. I think that's the strength of this BC defense. I don't think that's how you beat them.
David?
200, you say?
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna sell it. Yeah,
Okay.
I look back at that. I look at that Syracuse game. You know, Tech threw for 210, ran for 318. I think it'll be a very run-heavy game.
When the team's coming off a game when it had 140 total yards of offense, it's tough to go over on anything when it comes to offensively.
That was so they were playing such a good defense.
yeah, but it
though.
doesn't give you confidence.
You got to look at the entire season.
It's not
whole.
the 85 Bears out there. I mean, they can do 85. Yeah, 85 Bears. I think that's right.
That's correct.
140 is like something is wrong. It's not just what the other team is doing you, because Louisville hasn't given up that few, I don't think, in any of those games. So something was amiss and just not clicking with this offense.
Fair enough. Kyron Drones, 14 or more carries. David.
Oof. I'll buy it.
I'll buy it. I think for Tech to win, I think he has to have that many.
buy it. I mean, when you look at the success opposing quarterbacks has had against Boston College this year. I think you have to go into this game with the game plan of, he's going to be carrying it a lot.
Piggybacking off of that, Kyron Drones 60 or more rushing yards. Andy.
Bye.
Chris.
Bye.
David.
Bye.
All right. Virginia Tech, 5 plays of 20 or more yards. Chris.
5 plays of 20 or more. Sell.
Andy.
I'll sell that too. I think going with my theme of I
have no faith
I don't
in
think
this.
this is gonna be a big offensive game.
David.
5 plays of 20 or more yards this year?
Maybe if it was in lane, better offense.
Gio, how many plays of 20 or more yards this year do you think Virginia Tech has?
In total, I'm going to say 21.
24.
I was close. All right.
So that you divide that by 9 games? I'm going to say no. I'm going
right.
to sell it.
He's going to sell it. Everybody's selling it. Jalen Lane, how about this one? This one's interesting. In most games, he's either got, it's like 50-50 whether he has 2 carries or no carries at all. There's never a game where he has 1 carry or more than 2. So Jalen Lane, 2 or more carries. Chris.
Oh, gosh. Sell.
Selling it.
I'll
Andy.
sell that. I'll sell that one.
It's a weird one. I don't blame you. David.
I would sell it. He had 2 against Marshall, 2 against Pitt, none the next 2 weeks, and then 2 the last 2 weeks. So it's trending for him to have none. But for the sake of being different, I will buy it.
All right. Jalen Lane, 55 or more receiving yards. We're going to go right back to you, David.
I'll buy it.
I'll buy that. I think he's their best receiver. I think they need to get the ball to him.
Chris.
I'm going to go sell.
All right. Got to catch up in the standings, right? Quan Felton, 3 or more catches. We'll start with Andy.
I'll sell that one. I mean, he's either all or nothing on
Right.
some of these plays, and certainly a big play guy.
Chris.
Sell.
You say 3 or more?
3 or more.
I'm buying that. He's had 3, 3, and 4 catches the last 3 games.
That's what I was thinking. Kelly Lawson, 7 or more total tackles. Andy.
I'm going to sell because I think you might see a little bit more Jaden McDonald out there because of how he's played. So I just don't think he'll have the volume of snaps to get there.
His tackle numbers have significantly decreased the last 3 games. He's going from double digits to around that 7 tackle range.
I would say sell. McDonald started the weight game and played pretty well. Then, only got 5 snaps against Syracuse. And he was one of Tech's highest grading players this past week, while Lawson still remained pretty much at the bottom of the list. So I think Jaden McDonald deserves to start a game. I just think he's outplaying the other linebackers. I'm not saying he's playing great and that he's a dominant player, but I think the other guys have been playing at a low enough level and McDonald's been solid enough that I think he deserves to start and get some extended reps. So I think he'll be in there this week.
You posted on the boards yesterday that he had maybe the best PFF grade by a linebacker this year.
Maybe the best one game grade.
Yeah, Pry.
Sure.
I think Pry. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andy. I believe Pry said he was banged up. That's why he didn't get as much reps last week or the
Against
week before.
Syracuse.
Yeah, yeah.
How about
But
you,
he looked
David?
good last week. Remind me of the line.
7 or more tackles for Kelly Lawson.
I'm gonna
total.
sell.
He's going to sell it. All right. APR sack. Start with Chris.
Bye.
Andy.
I'm going to buy number 10. He gets there.
There you go. David.
Bye.
Virginia Tech goes better than 45% on 3rd down.
Oh,
Who's first?
I'll go first. And I'm gonna sell on
I
that.
think we're all going to give this.
They're not a great 3rd down team. I just don't think they magically solve it in this one.
David.
ooh, I'm looking at 3rd down conversions.
Oh no! See, David's got a. He throw his laptop away when we play this part of the game. He's looking up all the
I
numbers.
will sell it.
Analytics over here.
I was going to say, these two don't have that advantage. Bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how it plays out for him. Everybody sold that one?
I sold that one. David,
Everybody
did you
sold
answer?
it. All right, beautiful.
Yeah, no, I sold it. Yeah,
Tech goes for it on 4th down 2 or more times. Feels like a game where you might have to.
I'm going to buy that one because I think you look at BC's rush defense and you look at opportunities and keep that offense off the field. I think you have to.
4th and 1, 4th and 2, tush push, brotherly shove. What do you got, Chris?
Bye.
Buying it.
So Tech's only gone for it. Tech was going for it early in the year. 3-2, 3-3, 2-4. That was the first 6 games. Last 3 games, 1-0-1.
Well, last week it was 4th and 27 every time, so I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to go for it in that situation.
Peter Moore was busy. Virginia Tech scores 23 or more points. We'll start with Chris.
I picked him to score 23, so I guess I have to buy it, don't I?
All right.
Good
Andy.
line. I said 22. I'll
That's a
sell
great
it.
line.
All right. How about David?
So
Sell. All right. Virginia Tech goes 50% or better on touchdowns to field goals in the red zone. So, for instance, if we go on 6 trips, we got to at least get 3 touchdowns.
Another great one.
4 trips, 2 touchdowns. You get the
I'm
gist.
picking him to kick more field goals than touchdowns, so I guess I have to sell that one.
I mean, I'm picking a field goal fest in this one, so I'm going to sell.
David.
you said even? Like
Even or better?
50% in the
Even
red
or
zone?
better. If we go 5 times, it's going one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm selling.
It's going to sell it. All right, cool. Over under is at 49.5. She hitting or is the under going?
Me first?
Yeah, well, actually, you've been going first. We'll go with David.
Yeah, no, not hitting. Sell.
I said 22-20, so I'm going to go under.
Under.
So you're going under, Chris.
Yeah.
Andy's going under, and David, you said under. Mm-hmm. All right.
Mortal lock. This goes over now.
Yeah,
After all
have
of us so confident about this.
We'll see if you guys show Vegas who's boss or not. Virginia Tech wins the ball game, Andy.
I said that they do. I think this is this one's sort of a gut feeling type one because you look at the matchup and you go, BC's won 5 straight. Tech's coming up. It's worst loss of the season. My thought is who's going to be more motivated in this game? The BC team that just got bowl eligibility. You wonder if they're like, all right, we got there. We got to our mark. Or the VT team that got embarrassed last week. So road game against a team that runs the ball well. I shouldn't pick Virginia Tech in this one, but I am going to pick them to win.
David.
No.
No, he's selling.
I went against everybody this week.
All right.
Kind of like, we gave Andy, what was it, Syracuse? What game was it, Andy?
Wake Forest.
Wake Forest. We gave Andy the home dog, or the home favorite, I should say. BC's favorite in some places, not favorite in others.
Most places, Virginia Tech is now the favorite in
home
this game.
dog, BC. I have no faith in Tech on the road yet. Tech is 1-9 on the road under Brent Pry. This could be
Heck of a Liberty game, though.
This could be it's shaping up for Virginia Tech to have 2 wins on the road in 2 years on the road. Sorry. Virginia Tech in 2 years to have 2 wins on the road, both of them in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The other one would be at UVA this year.
Both the last game of the year, too.
Yeah, I think Tech has a really good chance, but I think it comes back to what we talked about earlier. Tech has to start fast. If Tech does not score first, Tech's playing from behind the entire game, trying to play catch up. I want to pick Tech, but I'm going opposite Andy in the gut.
I'm going Tech. There's plenty of reasons to pick BC, plenty of reasons to pick Tech. The reasons to pick BC is because Tech can't win on the road and they can't win close games, and all BC does is win close games. And they've got a mobile quarterback, which Tech doesn't defend very well at all, and in general, they're a good running team.
Sounds like a pretty good case to me.
Yeah, it's a great case. The problem is they got so many injuries on offense that a lot of those rushing numbers and a lot of the reasons they've been winning those close games, I don't think they're as valid now with the way the BC offense seems to be banged up. Now, if those guys magically get healthy this week, it's a different conversation. I just think the other matchups favor Tech in that BC doesn't force teams into long yardage situations, and BC has trouble defending running games in their own right. They have their own issues with defending mobile quarterbacks. And I just think Virginia Tech's healthier on offense, and as a result, they'll win the game this week. If I thought Castellanos was healthy, I'd pick Boston College, but I don't think he is.
Well, we've gone in incredibly long, and I'll take responsibility for
this. There's one more over-under you missed.
There is. Hold on. All right, we'll ask it now. I was going to save it. Andy, 3 or more bowls of clam chowder this weekend in Boston.
Man.
Chestnut Hill, I should say.
That's the right number there, because you have 2, and you're like, that was good. If you have that third one, you're like, this is a long second
If it goes to overtime.
It's tough.
They keep it there the whole game. This isn't like
I don't know how this works.
I think how big are the bowls?
I assume
they're like that big.
Okay.
It's like
how many times have you been to Chestnut Hill to cover a game?
I went back when I covered UVA back in mid-aughts.
So you've been there a lot.
I've been there a lot. It's a really good line because 2 you feel all right. 3 is like, what have I done?
I assume this is not going to count against our picks.
I feel.
Oh, this is counting.
No.
I feel like
because then he
His pick doesn't count.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
am I gonna be like Herb Street here? Is like I'm not making
This
a
is
pick
like
on this
insider
one.
information.
True, because you could sabotage one of them.
You could.
So
Yeah, you should have done this secretly when I wasn't aware of it.
know.
I'll probably say I'll probably buy. I think I'll probably get there, and I probably will regret that decision later in the game.
all right, what do you guys think?
I'm gonna buy.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna buy.
Just
So
simply, I have to pick the same answer as him because otherwise,
Andy's
he
gonna-
intentionally
yeah.
do
Yeah.
two.
Everyone's gonna buy.
Andy's going to need something to take his mind off of a really bad football game.
Wow. All right, so everyone's going to buy, and Andy controls all the power, but he would be sabotaging himself with bringing these guys down with him as well. Let's talk.
I mean, I wish you guys would have sold, or I would have sold,
Yeah.
and you guys would have bought them. And like, dude, it's like the meme where they're looking at two buttons. It's like, do I do it to win the bet, or do I do it because I like clam chowder?
Yeah, I should have asked this in private and kept tally and announced it some other way. But nevertheless, we are very, very late. So let's do a more brief hoops talk than maybe we had originally imagined. First with the women on Thursday. How about the magnitude of this for the fan base and for Virginia Tech women's basketball? I think that's the first thing we can speak of. You got two Final Four teams. Virginia Tech's invited to play this colossal game down in Charlotte, and the Allied tip-off just means so much for Kenny Brooks and the program he's built.
I think the high level of both programs and where they are in the rankings is incredible. There's just a lot of high level individual talent in this game too. I mean, you're talking about Caitlyn Clark, and Elizabeth Kitley. Georgia's great. I mean, it's rare that you see that many like elite All-American type players on the court together, and there will be a lot of eyes on that game just because of that. So I think it's great for both programs. It's certainly not going to hurt Kenny Brooks' recruiting. David has liked to point out it's big for the women's game itself, I think. So it's cool to be involved in that type of contest.
David, I ask you, what does Iowa bring to the table X's and O's wise? Because I think everybody thinks Iowa, they think, okay, Caitlyn Clark. Is there more than meets the eye with Iowa, or is it the Caitlyn Clark show? What are we going to see tomorrow night?
Yeah, it's interesting. This is a program that did not bring any transfers in the offseason. This is, yes, the Caitlyn Clark show, but three starters are back. Clark, Gabby Marshall, Kate Martin are back from last year. The two players that stepped in for Monica Cesano, who I would say was the second best player on the team last year, averaged 17 and 7. McKenna Warnock. The two players who stepped in have filled the role okay so far, but they're young, a little bit inexperienced. They just haven't played as many games. So Iowa had this thing going last year where very, very veteran group. They brought in kids off the bench who maybe weren't as experienced, but Clark has been in the battles, and a lot of the other players had too. This is a very different group. Some of the same core, very similar to Virginia Tech. Returned 3 starters from last year, so that's why there's a little bit of unknown in this game, right? And I think it's hard because if you look at Virginia Tech's 3 and those 3, one of those 3 for Iowa contains Caitlyn Clark. But in terms of balance, I think I'd have to lean Virginia Tech, just in terms of George Amore and Elizabeth Kitley and Kayla King, the firepower. It's going to be really, really interesting. The two players incoming, they're players in the front court, forward, center. So that's who's going to be defending Kitley. Younger, I shouldn't say younger, but less experienced players in a way, trying to stop a 2-time ACC Player of the Year. So that is kind of the matchup I'm very interested to watch. Everybody's going to be talking about Caitlyn Clark and Georgia Amore. I'm not even sure they're going to guard each other. There's a 5 or 6 inch height difference there. I think the biggest thing for Tech is get the ball inside to Kitley and make Iowa defend it.
How funny is it that Iowa has the most scintillating women's basketball player of the game, like the Steph Curry of women's basketball? Contrast that with its boring as heck football team that just fired the offensive coordinator. And it's just it's such a dichotomy between that. It's if Iowa fans deserve this, but I mean, this is just a great showcase for women's basketball. I think I asked yesterday, they said that they've sold 14,000 tickets to this game. Wow. I mean, just to be able to play it in an arena like this and, not filled up completely, but filled up pretty full. It's just a great showcase for the game, and it's kind of cool that they're playing this at a neutral site. And I think women's basketball is normally home sites when you do some of these non-conference games like this. It shows that you can go out there and you can draw in a big game like this.
Can I get a prediction out of you guys? Are we saving it or?
We don't need to save it.
I'm picking Virginia Tech. I know, my vast experience of watching one live women's game last year, Virginia Tech in the Final Four. But yeah, I'll pick the Hokies. I'll be a homer on this pick.
I know Tech's personnel pretty decently. I know nothing about Iowa outside of Caitlyn Clark. The one kind of scary thing for Tech is, and you can't tell whether this is an issue or not based on a blowout of High Point, is when you bring in transfers, how quickly do they gel with your returning players? Iowa doesn't have that issue because they didn't take transfers, but at the same time, I don't feel like Iowa's talent across the board is as good as Virginia Tech's. When it comes down to it, I think Caitlyn Clark is the best player in the country, is a generational talent, but 2 All-Americans are better than 1, and Tech will win.
All right, David.
Yeah, man. First of all, it's gonna be fun to cover.
Heck yeah.
I got to watch Caitlyn Clark play very close, up and personal in Seattle, and that was the first time I'd really gotten a chance to watch her. And I think the thing that will stand out to a lot of people afterwards is not just her scoring, but her ability to see the floor extremely well and to facilitate. Kenny Brooks said she's the women's basketball Steph Curry, and just the generational player and how she's changed the game. I think it'll be really, really close. I want to lean Tech. I honestly don't know if I should make a pick because I'm not sure. I literally do not know what's going to happen in this game because it's 2 teams' second game of the year. Iowa blew out Fairleigh Dickinson by 50 in the first game of the season. Both teams have so many unknowns. I think it's really tough to pick. The thing I will say is this: Thursday night, the two big other sporting events, and I wrote this yesterday, that this game is going up against Virginia Louisville football and Carolina Chicago NFL. The NFL game, 2 bad teams with 3 combined wins, and Louisville should probably blow out UVA. So the opportunity is there, the eyeballs, the potential to have on this game, it's there, and I don't think it'll be a quite sold-out Spectrum Center, but it'll be jam-packed. I expect a lot of Iowa fans.
It's going to be awesome. We flip to Friday night in the Spectrum Center. The men's basketball team takes on South Carolina in this Hall of Fame tip-off type showcase as well. You kind of didn't really have much opportunity to get your feet wet. With that being said, South Carolina really doesn't jump off the page at you. I want to, when we talk about the men's side, ask you more what you thought of the 100-55 win the other night. We thought Tyler Nickel personally played a little bit more than maybe we had expected, and he played pretty darn good. And I was very impressed with the freshmen, Jaden Young and Brandon Recksteiner. Recksteiner had 12 points.
Can't take too much out of it because this is going to be, will probably end up being the worst opponent Tech faces this year. Coppin State doesn't have a single player on their team that has averaged double figures at any point in his career. But anytime you can say you have 29 assists on 32 made baskets, that's got to be some kind of a record, right? Like the percentage of made shots that there's an assist for. I just think 29 out of 32 is, I would say, elite, but like there's got to be a word to describe better than elite. So I thought Virginia Tech was really good at sharing the ball. I think early last season, Mike Young wasn't happy with this team. Remember after their win in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, he got on the radio and said, "We're playing street ball." And I hate that in July, and I especially hate it in November. And Tech did not play street ball the other night. I think Sean Padula is very much in control. He looks like a better player this year, just from the fact that he went out there and he didn't try to force things unless they had to be forced. He really played within the offense. Nickel, I thought, was good. I thought he had a lot of energy. Thought he had a quicker first step than I thought he did. Was very impressed with Young as well. Obviously happy with the made field goals, but he also made a few what I would call basketball plays that I thought were big, and his playing time is something that to keep an eye on going forward. He's a guy who I think probably has a pretty high ceiling, and we'll see how he adjusts as he faces better competition. But yeah, I thought it went well. I don't think it necessarily answers any questions per se, but I was happy. I thought the assist ratio is the main thing to take away from it. I didn't think Padula was quite ready to run the offense for as many minutes as he had to run it last year. He didn't quite understand how to play within the offense. But I think seems to have a full grasp of that this year, and that's big.
David, your thoughts on the win over Coppin State?
Yeah, I talked with Carter Hill on TSL today about more in depth about it yesterday. I was impressed, but this is a bad Coppin State team with a first-year head coach. Can't take anything away from it, really. I think the biggest thing was, you saw some of the freshmen and some of the transfers get their feet wet, but then I think you look at a guy like Robbie Barron. He had 4 fouls, didn't get going. So there's a little bit of a give and take there. I wouldn't look into it too much. I'm excited for this game on Friday night. It's going to be late.
9:30 is the
It's probably going to be like a
later.
10 o'clock tip. Andy and Chris, I know you guys love great names. I have a great name for you from South Carolina men's basketball. He's a 6'9" forward, redshirt senior from Belgium. His name is Benjamin Boasman Verdonk.
Nice.
Verdonk.
I should have mentioned Bug Jones when we were talking about football for Boston College.
It's a
That's
solid
good one.
name.
Number 25, yeah.
As far as this game on Friday is concerned, this is a South Carolina team that only won 11 games last year. It's a second-year head coach in Lamont Paris. He and Mike Young know each other pretty well. He was at Chattanooga in 17-18. That was his first year when Mike Young was at Wofford. So they overlapped in the SoCon for a little bit. Last year, they were very three-point heavy offensively, didn't defend the twos well. They lost 4 of their 7 big contributors from last year are back. 2 graduated, 1 transferred. The big name that you might recognize that they brought in is BJ Mack. He played for Mike Young at Wofford. So a little bit of familiarity there.
Wasn't he committed to Tech at one point? He was committed to Buzz Williams at one point. Yeah, him and the 2 twins from Greensboro, I think, were all committed to Tech.
Yeah, that sounds
at one point.
That sounds right. But anyway, he played for Mike Young. Now he's playing against Mike Young with South Carolina. This is an okay team. They had an 8-game losing streak last year in the SEC. I think there are a lot of questions about him. Ken Palm has South Carolina at 221 last year, up to 61 currently. They added 4 guys who are all solid scorers. A guy from the Citadel, a guy from Vanderbilt, a guy from Minnesota. I'm gonna kind of split up a preview today. That when this podcast is published, you should be able to read my preview. I'm gonna do half Iowa, half South Carolina, just to get a good, give everybody a good taste of everything. This is a game that you'll be able to tell a lot more than the Coppin State game, and that's, I don't think, saying a lot because Coppin State's not very good. This is the first test for Virginia Tech in terms of a team with pretty good talent. Not sure how good of a team South Carolina is. I saw them playing Charleston last year. First couple games of Paris's tenure, not very good. But year 2 should be better. Brought in a bunch of transfers. That is the 3rd game of a triple header following UVA Florida and Liberty Charlotte. So it's going to be a very, very late night in Charlotte on Friday.
No doubt. Well, we've gone incredibly long. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the weekend this weekend. It's going to be very, very fun. We got women's basketball Thursday against Iowa inside the Spectrum Center. Then Friday night, you got the men's basketball team as well as Ohio State wrestling inside Castle Coliseum. And, of course, Saturday, a noon kick up in Chestnut Hill. The football team takes on Boston College. It was a fun one. We hope you enjoy. For Will Stewart, for David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. Thanks for joining us on episode 328 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll see you next week.